October 1st, 331 BCE, on the open plains of Mesopotamia, the Persian Empire prepares to end the war forever. Hundreds of thousands stand ready, cavalry, chariots, elephants, an empire assembled to crush one man. Facing them are just 47,000 Macedonians, led by a king who has never lost and cannot retreat. Facing them are just 47,000 Macedonians, led by a king who has never lost and cannot retreat. Gaugamela was not chosen by chance. Darius selected this battlefield because it erased Alexander's advantages. Ground was flattened so cavalry could maneuver freely and chariots could reach full speed. There were no rivers to anchor a defense, no hills to protect flanks. On this open plain, numbers were meant to decide everything. Darius believed discipline would collapse beneath mass, and that Alexander's army would be surrounded, crushed, and erased in a single day. Alexander stood deep inside enemy territory. The supply lines stretched across hostile land. Greece lay far behind him. Defeat here would mean annihilation, not retreat. There would be no second army, no chance to recover. Alexander understood that Gaugamela would not be survived by caution. It would be decided by committing everything he had in a single, irreversible moment. The Persian army assembled at Gaugamela was the largest force the ancient world had ever seen. Infantry drawn from Babylon, Media, Syria, and beyond filled the center. Cavalry from Bactria and Scythia stretched across the wings. 200 scythed chariots waited at the front. War elephants stood behind them. This was not an army built to adapt. It was built to overwhelm. Against this stood 47,000 Macedonians and Greeks. 31,000 heavy infantry formed the phalanx, locked shoulder to shoulder with 18-foot sarissas. Light troops waited to disrupt chariots. 7,000 cavalry held the wings. There were no reserves. Every man would be used. This was not a formation built to endure. It was built to strike once and decide the war. The night before battle revealed the difference between the two armies. Persian troops remained awake, standing under arms, fearing a night attack. Macedonian officers urged Alexander to strike first. He refused. Alexander wanted Darius to see him. He wanted victory in daylight, undeniable and final. While Persia waited anxiously, Alexander slept. At sunrise, the Persian line revealed its true danger. It stretched far beyond the Macedonian flanks, making encirclement inevitable if Alexander advanced directly. Darius's plan was simple: absorb the attack, then crush the enemy from both sides. Alexander saw the threat instantly. To survive, he would have to force Persia to move first. Instead of advancing straight ahead, Alexander ordered his entire line to drift slowly to the right. To Persian commanders, it looked like a fatal mistake. But the movement forced the Persian left to extend outward to maintain overlap. Unit by unit, the Persian formation stretched thinner. Alexander was not attacking the army. He was attacking its shape. Bessus, commanding the Persian left, could not allow Alexander to slip past him. He committed thousands of cavalry, extending farther and farther to keep pace. In doing so, he weakened the Persian center, the one place that could not afford to thin. The trap Alexander designed was now fully set. Seeing the movement, Darius unleashed the chariots. 200 scythed machines thundered forward, blades flashing, horses screaming across the plain. This was meant to shatter the Macedonian center instantly. Instead, the phalanx opened lanes. Chariots passed through empty space. Drivers were cut down. Most terrifying weapon Persia possessed failed in seconds. The elephants followed, towering and terrifying. Light infantry swarmed them with missiles and spears, striking eyes and legs. Confused and wounded, the animals turned sideways into gaps, where phalanx spears finished them. Persia had spent its shock weapons and gained nothing. While Alexander maneuvered on the right, the Macedonian left came under extreme pressure. Persian cavalry under Mazaeus surged forward in waves, exploiting their numerical advantage and threatening to break through. Parmenion fought desperately to hold the line, committing every available unit to prevent collapse. Dust, confusion, and relentless attacks strained discipline. If the left flank failed, Alexander's success in the center would be meaningless. Messages were sent urgently, warning that the battle still hung in the balance. As Persian cavalry committed fully on both flanks, the center began to weaken. Units had been drawn outward to maintain encirclement, leaving fewer troops to protect the royal position. Orders crossed and formations lost alignment. From a distance, the Persian host still looked immense, but its internal cohesion was eroding. Alexander watched carefully. He was not searching for chaos, only for exposure. The moment he waited for was approaching. Then it happened. A narrow gap opened near the Persian center left, where cavalry had been drawn away and infantry struggled to realign. It was not obvious to most observers, but to Alexander, it was unmistakable. Years of campaigning had trained him to recognize moments like this. The Persian formation had stretched too far. The empire's center of gravity was exposed. The battle could now be ended in a single stroke. Alexander immediately gathered the companion cavalry and compressed them into a tight wedge. This formation was not designed for prolonged combat or wide maneuver. It existed for one purpose: to punch through a single point with overwhelming force. Every rider understood the target. This was not an attack against the army. It was an attack against the king. The fate of the empire now rested on moments. The wedge surged forward with brutal precision. Macedonian cavalry smashed into the weakened Persian center, tearing through guards and scattering defenders. What had been distant fighting collapsed inward toward the royal position. The noise, dust, and motion intensified as Alexander drove straight toward the heart of Persian command. The battle was no longer abstract. It was personal, immediate, and irreversible. As Macedonian cavalry closed in, the situation around Darius deteriorated rapidly. Guards fell, control vanished, and the certainty he carried into battle evaporated. The memory of Isis returned with brutal clarity. Once again, the enemy king was approaching through collapsing lines. The battlefield no longer felt controlled. It felt dangerous. For Darius, the moment of decision arrived. Darius turned his chariot and fled. The decision was instantaneous and catastrophic. Thousands of Persian soldiers saw their king abandon the field. In that single act, imperial command ceased to exist. Orders stopped. Confidence vanished. The Persian army had not been destroyed, but it had been leaderless, in full view of its own men. With the king gone, the Persian center dissolved. Units disengaged without coordination. What had been an empire became a mass of retreating men. Discipline collapsed faster than any pursuit could exploit. Alexander had not annihilated the Persian army. He had removed its authority, and the structure holding it together collapsed instantly. Alexander immediately pressed forward, intent on capturing Darius and ending the war completely. The opportunity was real. Persian resistance ahead was minimal. But even as victory unfolded, messages arrived from the left. Parmenion was still under heavy pressure. The battle was not fully won. Alexander made a decision few conquerors would have made. He turned back. Leaving the fleeing king, he reinforced the left flank and stabilized the line. Glory could wait. Survival and cohesion came first. It was a commander's choice, not a conqueror's impulse, and it ensured the army endured intact. By late afternoon, resistance faded across the plain. Persian forces withdrew in all directions. Gaugamela was over. Alexander stood victorious, not because he destroyed an army, but because he shattered its ability to function. The battle had ended an empire in a single day. The consequences were immediate. Babylon opened its gates. Susa surrendered its treasury. Cities chose submission over resistance. Persia still existed on maps, but not in reality. Authority had collapsed without siege or prolonged war. Gaugamela had broken the empire's spine. Gaugamela changed warfare forever, proved that numbers alone could not save an empire. Leadership, timing, and psychological collapse mattered more than mass. Alexander demonstrated that breaking command could end a war faster than slaughter. This was not just a victory, it was a lesson written into history. At 25 years old, Alexander ended 2 centuries of Persian dominance in a single afternoon. Gaugamela was not merely a battle. It was the moment the ancient world changed direction, and an empire ceased to exist in practice, if not yet in name. Gaugamela ended the Persian Empire in the open field, but empires do not die quietly. In 330 BCE, Alexander the Great pushed east, hunting legitimacy, not territory. Ahead of him lay mountains, not plains, narrow roads, sheer cliffs, and a single pass where numbers meant nothing. At a place later called the Persian Gate, A smaller Persian force prepared an ambush designed to do what Darius could not. No cavalry charges. No grand maneuvers. Only rock, steel, and surprise. This was not a battle Alexander could outthink easily, and for the first time since crossing into Asia, his army would walk straight into a trap meant to stop him completely. The war was not finished. It had only changed its shape.